The Nightingale by Hans Christian Andersen.
The palace of the Emperor of China was the most beautiful palace in the world. It was made entirely of fine porcelain, which was so brittle that whoever touched it had to be very careful. The choicest flowers were to be seen in the garden, and to the prettiest of these little silver bells were fastened in order that their tinkling might prevent anyone from passing by without noticing them. Yes, everything in the Emperor's garden was wonderfully well arranged, and the garden itself stretched so far that even the gardener did not know the end of it. Whoever walked farther than the end of the garden, however, came to a beautiful wood with very high trees, and beyond that to the sea. The tall trees went right down to the sea, which was very deep and blue, so that large ships could sail close below their branches. And among the branches dwelt a nightingale, who sang so sweetly that even the poor fishermen, who had so much else to do when they came out at night time to cast their nets, would stand still to listen to her song. Travellers came from all parts of the world to the Emperor's city, and they admired the city, the palace, and the garden. But if they heard the nightingale, they all said, "This is the best." And they talked about her after they went home. And learned men who wrote books about the city, the palace, and the garden praised the nightingale above everything else. Poets also wrote the most beautiful verses about the nightingale of the wood near the sea. These books went round the world, and one of them at last reached the Emperor. He read and nodded his head at every phrase, for these splendid descriptions of the city, the palace, and the garden pleased him greatly. But at last he saw something that surprised him. The words, "But the nightingale is the best of all," were written in the book.
What in the world is this? The nightingale? I do not know it at all. Can there be such a bird in my empire, in my garden even, without my having even heard of it? Truly, one may indeed learn something from books.
So he called his Prime Minister. Now this was so grand a personage that no one of inferior rank might speak to him. And if one did venture to ask him a question, his only answer was, "Pooh," which has no particular meaning.
There is said to be a very remarkable bird here called the nightingale. Her song, they say, is worth more than anything else in all my dominions. Why has no one ever told me of her?
I have never before heard her mentioned. She has never been presented at court.
I wish her to come and sing before me this evening. The whole world, it seems, knows what I have better than I do myself.
I have never before heard her mentioned. But I will try to find her.
But where was she to be found? The Prime Minister ran up one flight of steps, down another, through halls, and through passages, but not one of all the people he met had ever heard of the nightingale. So he went back to the Emperor and said,
It must be a fable invented by a man who wrote the book. Your Imperial Majesty must not believe all that is written in books. Much in them is pure invention.
But the book in which I have read it was sent me by the high and mighty Emperor of Japan, and therefore it cannot be untrue. I wish to hear the nightingale. She must be here this evening. And if she does not come, after supper the whole court shall be flogged.
In great alarm, the Prime Minister again ran upstairs and downstairs, through the halls and through passages, and half the court ran with him, for no one liked the idea of being flogged. Many were the questions asked about the wonderful nightingale, of whom the whole world talked, and about whom no one at court knew anything. At last they met a poor little girl in the kitchen, who said,
"Oh, yes, the nightingale. I know her very well. Oh, how she can sing! Every evening I carry the fragments left at the table to my poor sick mother. She lives by the seashore, and when I am coming back and stay to rest a little in the woods, I hear the nightingale sing. It makes the tears come into my eyes."
Little kitchen maiden, I will get you a good place in the kitchen, and you shall have permission to see the Emperor dine, if you will take us to the nightingale, for she is expected at court this evening.
So they went together to the wood where the nightingale was accustomed to sing, and half the court went with them.
Listen, listen, there she sits.
Is it possible? I should not have thought of it. How simple she looks. She must certainly have changed colour at the sight of so many distinguished personages.
Little nightingale, our gracious emperor wishes you to sing something to him.
"With the greatest pleasure," said the nightingale, and she sang so beautifully that everyone was enchanted.
It sounds like glass bells. And look at her little throat, how it moves. Oh, it is amazing that we should never have heard her before. She will have a great success at court.
"Shall I sing again to the emperor?" asked the nightingale, for she thought the emperor was among them.
Most excellent nightingale, I have the honor to invite you to a court festival, which will take place this evening, when His Imperial Majesty will be delighted to hear you sing.
"My song would sound far better among the green trees," said the nightingale, but she followed willingly when she heard that the emperor wished it. In the centre of the grand hall where the emperor sat, a golden perch had been fixed, on which the nightingale was to sit. The whole court was present, and the little kitchen maid received permission to stand behind the door, for she now had the rank and title of Maid of the Kitchen. All were dressed in their finest clothes, and all eyes were fixed upon the little grey bird, to whom the emperor nodded, as a signal for her to begin. The nightingale sang so sweetly that tears came into the emperor's eyes, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Then the nightingale sang more sweetly still, and touched the hearts of all who heard her. And the emperor was so pleased that he said,
"The nightingale shall have my golden slippers, and wear them round her neck."
But the nightingale thanked him and said she was already sufficiently rewarded. "I have seen tears in the emperor's eyes. That is the greatest reward I can have. The tears of an emperor have a special value. I feel myself highly honored. And then she sang again more charmingly than ever. Even the footmen and chambermaids declared that they were quite satisfied, which was a great thing to say, for of all people they are the most difficult to please. Yes, indeed, the nightingale's success was complete. She was now to remain at court, to have her own cage, with permission to fly out twice in the day and once in the night. 12 servants were set apart to wait on her on these occasions, who were each to hold the end of a silken band fastened round her foot. There was not much pleasure in that kind of flying. All the city was talking of the wonderful bird, and when two people met, one would say only nighting and the other gale. And then they sighed and understood each other perfectly. Indeed, 11 of the children of the citizens were named after the nightingale, but not one of them could sing a note. One day, a large parcel arrived for the emperor, on which was written, "The Nightingale."
Here we have another new book about our famous bird.
But it was not a book. It was a little piece of mechanism lying in a box. An artificial nightingale, which was intended to look like the living one, but covered all over with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. When this artificial bird had been wound up, it could sing one of the tunes that the real nightingale sang, and its tail, all glittering with silver and gold, went up and down all the time. And he who had brought the bird was given the title of Chief Imperial Nightingale Bringer. Then the emperor ordered that the real and the toy nightingales should sing together. But it did not succeed, for the real nightingale sang in her own natural way, and the artificial bird produced its tones by wheels.
It is not his fault. He keeps exact time.
So the artificial bird now sang alone. He was quite as successful as the real nightingale, and then he was so much prettier to look at. His plumage sparkled like jewels. 33 times he sang one and the same tune, and yet he was not weary. Everyone would happily have heard him again. The emperor, however, now wished the real nightingale to sing something. But where was she? No one had noticed that she had flown out of the open window, flown away to her own green wood.
What is the meaning of this?
The music master praised the bird very highly. Indeed, he declared it was superior to the real nightingale in every way.
With the real nightingale, one could never reckon on what was coming. But everything is certain with the artificial bird. He will sing in this one way, and no other. This can be proved. He can be taken to pieces, and the works can be shown, where the wheels lie, how they move, and how one follows from another.
The artist received permission to show the bird to the people on the following Sunday.
They too shall hear him sing.
So they heard him, and were as well pleased as if they had all been drinking tea. For it is tea that makes the Chinese merry. But the fisherman, who had heard the real nightingale, said,
Sounds very pretty. Almost like the real bird. But yet there's something wanting, I don't know what.
The real nightingale was banished from the empire. The artificial bird had his place on a silken cushion close to the emperor's bed. All the presents he received, gold and precious stones, lay around him. He had been given the rank and title of High Imperial Singer of the Boudoir. And the music master wrote 25 volumes about the artificial bird, with the longest and most difficult words that are to be found in the Chinese language. So, of course, all said they had read and understood them. Otherwise they would have been stupid and perhaps would have been flogged. So it went on for a year. The emperor, the court, and all the Chinese knew every note of the artificial bird's song by heart. But that was why they enjoyed it so much. They could now sing with him. The little boys in the street sang, and the emperor himself sang too. But one evening, when the bird was in full voice, and the emperor lay in bed and listened, suddenly the emperor jumped quickly out of bed and had his chief physician called. But of what use could he be? Then a clockmaker was fetched, and at last, after a great deal of discussion and consultation, the bird was in some measure put to rights again. But the clockmaker said he must be spared much singing, for the pegs were almost worn out, and it was impossible to put in new ones, at least without spoiling the music. There was great lamentation, for now the artificial bird was allowed to sing only once a year, and even then there were difficulties. However, the music master made a short speech full of his favourite long words, and said the bird was as good as ever, and of course no one contradicted him. 5 years passed. A great affliction had overcome the whole empire, for the emperor was ill, and it was reported that he would not live. A new emperor had already been chosen, and the people stood in the street outside the palace and asked the prime minister how the emperor was.
Boo!
Said he, and shook his head. Cold and pale lay the emperor in his magnificent bed. All the court believed him to be already dead, and everyone ran off to greet the new emperor. But the emperor was not yet dead. He could scarcely breathe, however, and it appeared to him that something was sitting on his chest. He opened his eyes and saw that it was Death. He had put on the emperor's crown, and in one hand held the golden scimitar, and in the other the splendid imperial banner. From under the folds of the thick velvet hangings, the strangest-looking heads were peering forth, some with very ugly faces, and others with looks that were extremely gentle and lovely. These were the bad and good deeds of the emperor, which were now all fixing their eyes upon him, whilst Death sat on his heart. And they began reproaching him in such a manner that the sweat broke out upon his forehead.
I have never known anything like it. Music, music, the great Chinese drum. Let me not hear what they are saying.
They went on, however, and Death, in the Chinese manner, nodded his head to every word.
Music, music. You dear little golden bird, sing, I beg you, sing. I have given you gold and precious stones. I have even hung my golden slippers round your neck. Sing, I beg you, sing.
But the bird was silent. There was no one there to wind him up, and without that he could not sing. Death continued to stare at the emperor with his great hollow eyes, and everywhere it was still, fearfully still. All at once came the sweetest music through the window. It was the little living nightingale who was sitting on a branch outside. She had heard of her emperor's severe illness and had come to sing to him of comfort and hope. As she sang, the spectral forms became paler and paler. The blood flowed more and more quickly through the emperor's feeble body, and even Death listened and said, "Go on, little nightingale. Will you give me the beautiful golden sword? Will you give me the rich banner? And will you give me the emperor's crown? Said the bird. And Death gave up all these treasures for a song. And the nightingale sang on. She sang of the quiet churchyard where white roses blossom, where the lilac sends forth its fragrance, and the fresh grass is bedewed with the tears of the sorrowing friends of the departed. Then Death was seized with a longing to see his garden, and, like a cold white shadow, flew out of the window.
Thanks, thanks, little bird. I know you well. I banished you from my realm, and you have sung away those evil faces from my bed, and death from my heart. How can I reward you?
You have already rewarded me, said the nightingale. I have seen tears in your eyes, as when I sang to you for the first time. Those I shall never forget. They are the jewels that gladden a minstrel's heart. But sleep now, and wake fresh and healthy. I will sing to you again. And she sang, and the emperor fell into a sweet sleep. Oh, how soft and refreshing it was! The sun shone in at the window when he awoke, strong and healthy. Not one of his servants had returned, for they all believed him dead. Only the nightingale still sat beside him and sang.
You shall always stay with me. You shall only sing when it pleases you. And the artificial bird I will break into 1,000 pieces.
Do not so, said the nightingale. He has done what he could. Take care of him. I cannot stay in the palace, but let me come when I like. I will sit on the branches close to the window in the evening and sing to you, so that you may be happy and have thoughts full of joy. I will sing to you of those who rejoice and of those who suffer. I will sing to you of all that is good or bad, which is hidden from you. I love your heart more than your crown. I will come, I will sing, but you must promise me one thing.
Everything.
And now he stood in his imperial splendor, which he had put on, and held to his heart the scimitar so heavy with gold. One thing I beg of you, let no one know that you have a little bird who tells you everything. Then all will go well. And the nightingale flew away. The attendants came in to look at their dead emperor. And the emperor said,
Good morning.